Okay, everyone's here. Let us begin. So hello, welcome everybody. I'm so happy to have you all here attending. So I'm Isla Weber. I'm an undergraduate studying neuroscience at Princeton. So I will be moderating the grad school panel today for PsychedelX. This is the first day of PsychedelX week, and we're so excited to get going. And the YouTube videos should actually have gone live 3 minutes ago. So after this panel, you should all go and watch all of the participants' presentations. The YouTube link is on the PsychedelX website. And today at the grad school panel, I have with me Haley Dourron, Maria Bălăeț, Ari Brouwer, and Victor Acero. And we will be talking about studying psychedelics in grad school and all things related. So throughout the panel, please send in questions in the Q&A if you have any that come up, and we'll try to get to your questions. This is meant to be useful for you, so any question is valid. And here we go. So if we first do a quick round to introduce ourselves. So you guys each want to take a turn and sort of talk about where you're from, what you're studying, what school you go to, and maybe other affiliations or organizations you're part of, or those kinds of things.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. So my name is Victor Acero. I'm a third year bioengineering PhD student at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm working in the Cullen lab, which focuses on like neural tissue engineering and tissue innervation and traumatic brain injury. But my particular focus is on developing psychedelic therapies for traumatic brain injury. Right now, I'm especially interested in salvinorin loaded microparticles for traumatic brain injury. I'm a co-founder for the Penn Society for Psychedelic Science and a co-founder for the Intercollegiate Psychedelic Network.
I'll jump in. I'm Ari Brouwer. I'm going to be attending University of Wisconsin come next fall as PhD in Human Development and Family Studies, working with a psychiatrist there. They're starting to get into some more psychedelic research there, so we'll see what's on the table, but yeah.
All right, I'm Haley Dourron, and I am at University of Alabama, Birmingham. I'm a first year health behavior student, and I'm in the Hendricks lab, which focuses on psilocybin assisted therapies, particularly for addiction. And my research focuses a lot on neuroimaging and psychedelics, as well as some sometimes schizophrenia as well. So yeah.
Hi everyone, I suppose I'm the last one left to introduce myself. I'm a PhD student at Imperial College London. My PhD is primarily focusing on computational neuroscience. So basically I'm trying to apply different ways of cognitive tracking to understand what happens in different neurological conditions, but also in altered states. And the main study that I'm running is psychedelics.cognitron.co.uk. So if you just go on this link, you can find out more about what I'm doing.
Awesome, thank you guys. Okay, so I'll just get started with some general questions that I had lined up. So, but this can be like a casual conversation. So if it ends up going off in other directions, that's perfectly fine. So my first question was, what did you all study in undergrad? Or I guess all of you don't have to answer every question, but maybe if you feel you have something to add, go ahead. But what did you study in undergrad, and what are you studying in grad school? I guess we already went over that. And how did you come to decide to study what you are studying and pick your program? I guess it's sort of a broad question, but you can answer it however you like.
So for me in undergrad, I was a psychology major, but I chose that major mostly because it allowed me the flexibility to take a variety of classes in neuroscience, in philosophy, and really have like a broad scope of knowledge. I was really drawn to psychedelics specifically, studying that in grad school because it's such an open area. There are so many unanswered questions, and it seems that with so many, with psilocybin assisted therapy, like seemingly pending approval so quickly, we need to be answering these questions now. So that's kind of what made me decide I specifically wanted to focus on psychedelics in grad school, but I had always planned to be in like psychology, neuroscience somehow.
Should I go next? Or you go, Victor?
So in undergrad, I actually studied engineering science and mechanics at Penn State, and most of I did that major because it was also like incredibly flexible within like the engineering disciplines. You took classes like from every department, but I was more focused on like nano engineering and material science. And when I went to grad school, I initially was in a material science PhD program. And it was after like a year in that program that I realized I wasn't enjoying that, dropped out and got into the bioengineering program. So I would like to give like some hope to undergrads there. Just that, you know, this might depend like on the field you're going into. I've heard psychology is like a little bit more like stringent than wants people with like a pretty heavy psychology undergrad background or things like that. But I think that what you study in undergraduate is not that important as the work you're actually doing. And whether you can just like demonstrate that you have like a lot like and like a scientific mind, and that I think goes a lot further than saying I took all these classes in X discipline and that's where I'm applying to grad school. And even if you apply to a program and you don't like it, it's not the end of the world. If you really think your passion is somewhere else, you can still flex that around, make it work.
Cool. Yeah, I should go next for this. So I started going on a medical degree initially. I was aiming at becoming a doctor of some kind. And I just want to mention that I'm on the European side, so that's very different to how it works in the US, where I understand that you actually have a degree before you go into medicine. But I was just so eager to get out of it and start working on things that I finished after a couple of years and started doing actual science. But to answer the question more broadly of why I got interested in psychedelics specifically. So I suppose this is more on a personal level, and that's because I grew up in a circle where everyone apart from me was taking drugs, and a lot of them. And I always wondered what is happening in the brains of all of my friends. And I was always trying to understand, is this okay? Is this not okay? How can we best try to maximize the benefits and make sure that my friends are not just gonna disappear tomorrow. So I suppose that's why since 2014, I started doing quite a bit of research with psychedelics, starting with derivatives of ketamine. That is, if you want to consider ketamine a psychedelic, and looking at how ketamine can be used for manipulating memory processing. But then I started focusing this more broadly because it is coincided with a boom in 2014 of psychedelics research. So for the past, I can't believe it's almost 7 years now, I've been growing on trying to understand the effects of these compounds, and eventually ended up focusing some of my work now on it. So yeah.
Awesome.
All right. I studied neuroscience and religious studies undergrad. I started with the religious studies and was really interested in spiritual experiences and modes of, transforming consciousness, or however you want to say that. And then I got more interested in the biology of the situation after seeing various examples of where that could go in different people. And it's been a long time since then. So once I put those things together, it was kind of studying the intersection between spiritual experience psychosis and psychedelic drugs. And then I pursued those interests in a school of theology at Boston University, studying the religious side of that. And then in terms of how I'm moving into grad school, I just got lucky sending my thesis to Dr. Carhart Harris, who I'm sure Maria knows, and Imperial College. And we wrote a paper together, and that's what's enabled me to transition into a PhD program. So, and I kind of agree with Victor here that if you're interested in a particular subject, you'll probably have the motivation to study different facets of it. And if you have, concentration and stuff, then you really can take things in different directions. And even if you didn't necessarily start with that intention in mind. So.
Yeah, that's, I think, a good kind of thing to know, that you don't have to necessarily have an undergrad degree that makes the most sense for what you want to study in grad school. One thing that I think, did any of you have did you have to sit down and really think about, okay, do I want to go to grad school? What are the pros and cons? And had to sit down and think about that decision? Or was it just of course I'm going to grad school? And if you did have to sit down and think about it, what were your pros and cons, and how did you eventually come to your decision and follow the path you're on?
I just never had a doubt. So I'm probably one of those people who, I know I've noticed this, it's quite difficult to find this category that doesn't really weigh things these days, because it's very important to do it and everyone should do it. I kind of headed straight into it being like, of course I'm doing it. I mean, I don't care, I'm going to be paid a bursary that barely covers living costs. It's like, yay, more years in school. But for me personally, there was never a doubt that this was the route that I wanted to take. And I think it's mainly because I wanted to establish myself in this field. So I thought that going and pursuing a PhD where you basically take ownership of everything that you are producing, and you are actively trying to answer some big questions in a field, and that is the main priority of your everyday existence. That was the driver in this case. But I'm sure there's a lot of cons to this, and everyone should definitely weigh in their personal circumstances here.
I also never had any doubts that I wanted to go to grad school. I can't imagine my life not being in science. I feel like I could not function in a normal job. But when deciding what exactly I wanted to study in grad school, I have an interest in a lot of different areas of research. I could have studied just schizophrenia sort of more in general or something like that. But ultimately, with the field being so open with psychedelics, I basically came to the point where I decided I had to be in a program related to psychedelics. And I feel that if you really want to be focusing on psychedelics in grad school, there comes a point where you just have to decide that's what you want to do and be extremely persistent with finding a program that will allow you to do that, which is quite difficult given the number of programs currently studying this. But if you decide that that's what you want to do, and you start reaching out to people pretty aggressively early on, then I think that you will be able to find a way in, hopefully.
Yeah. So for me, I said I wanted to go to grad school from since the first day of college, because I was part of a program that was called Millennium Scholars, trying to get people, underrepresented minorities, into PhD programs. And so you had to kind of have that commitment coming into the first day. I definitely didn't understand what it meant though, to want to go to grad school truly. But as I kind of kept doing research throughout undergrad, I came to just really want to go to grad school because I wanted to, learn how to think, learn how to be critical, learn how to ask novel questions. And that kind of training really appealed to me. I definitely had a lot of uncertainty about what exactly I wanted to study in grad school, though. That was constantly going back and forth and negotiating. So yeah, I definitely, if you think you want to go to grad school, or even have an inkling about it, I think the best thing to do is to start getting some early experiences in research, because the only way you will know if you like it is if you try it. And a lot of my changing from disciplines has been triggered by having experience in a particular aspect of research and not liking it. And even though I always felt very confident that I wanted to go to grad school, and the people in my program would say that of all the people, I was the one who was who seemed the most like nerdy and geeked out to go to grad school that once I got here, I have a lot of imposter syndrome. There's a lot of like doubts of like, did I make the right choice? Maybe I'm not actually good enough for this. Maybe I'm not like able to ask as good questions as like everybody else in my program. So yeah, I just want to emphasize that uncertainty and doubt and hesitation is definitely not it's not a reason not to do it. It's maybe something to investigate more closely and deeply on a personal level, but everybody gets hesitations from time to time about what they're doing, if it's the right choice.
Yeah, so I had doubts about going to grad school more on a practical side of things. I didn't think I was gonna, at one point in my life, I didn't think there was an opportunity for me to move forward in the psychedelic research field. And so I taught high school for a year. I led wilderness expeditions for a number of years. And for me, what's ultimately bringing me back there is just I'm obsessed with the ideas. So I can't, I think I would be bored by doing anything else. So I mean, that's one good reason to go to grad school. If you just like studying what you're studying so much that you would be bored without doing it, because the compensation's not great. There's definitely better ways to make money and have a more probably balanced life in some regards. But
awesome. Thank you guys so much. Okay. And a little more kind of practically speaking, how many programs did you apply for? How many times did you apply? When did you begin preparing to apply? Yeah, I think start with those. Yeah.
The one that I'm on, that's the only one I applied to.
Is that normal to just apply to one? No.
But I just knew what I wanted to do and with who I wanted to work with. And there was no question. As again, like, this is not common, and by no means do not do this. It's very risky. You risk losing a year or having to do a job or something else. I'm mostly sharing this because people should be aware that it's probably a risky thing to do this. But in my case, I worked in research quite a lot, as I said, for, I think, I've basically been working in research since I was 14 in these different labs, specifically with drugs for the past 7 years. But I kind of started understanding how this works. I made sure that the team that I was going to join here at Imperial, and that is in the computational and cognitive sciences department, was the team that I enjoyed working with, that I worked with before. And there was no doubt in my mind that this was going to be the circle where I was going to spend my PhD years, because it's a very long investment and it's many years of your life that you do need to understand that you're going to spend with a very small group of people. And I think that's what made me choose this. But if you do not already have these things in place, like knowing the team, knowing exactly what your project plan would be, you should definitely try to meet as many other groups and try to investigate other options. So, yeah.
For me, I only applied to 2 programs because I knew those programs would be a very good fit if I was able to get in. And I looked everywhere for programs that were focused on psychedelics that were taking students, and I could only find 2. And I looked everywhere, and I started looking like the summer before I applied. And another thing I did that's also important is reaching out to people for like potential research assistantship things, postdocs. If you don't get into grad school, I would highly recommend doing that as a backup option. And I had 2 potential research like postdocs set up just in case I didn't get in. And
Can you explain what those are for people who don't know?
So basically working like full-time as a research assistant for like a year or so.
A postdoc or?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I would suggest to people is you want to start emailing people right away, like as soon as you figure out that that's a program you might want to apply to, because the longer the person is aware of your interest, the better that makes you seem. but oftentimes the people in psychedelic research are extremely busy and they might not see those emails. So one thing I did is the fall I was applying to grad school is I went to every single psychedelic conference I could possibly attend. It was like ridiculous. And I would go up to the speakers afterwards and say, hey, are you taking any grad students? And it was like obnoxious. But getting in front of people is how you convince someone, oh, this might be a good person, because they get so many emails with people who are interested. So the current program I'm in now, I did meet my advisor, Peter Hendricks, after one of his talks. So that strategy seemed to work when emails weren't.
Awesome. Yeah, I've also gotten an opportunity, and I'm volunteering and doing some research with Imperial, and that's how I got involved. Was I talked to Taylor Lyons after a conference talk and got involved that way. So I think that's a good tip. If people are able to.
Here as well, people always want help. Like if you can offer help, people are to take help, even if they can't offer you a studentship. If you just want to be part of the research, just as Isla did, that's always appreciated.
Yeah, I applied to something like 9 to 10 schools, although after I was done with the process, I came to appreciate that there was no point in applying to schools that I was not like 100% eager to go to and excited to go to. Like safety schools, you don't want to apply to like a safe, like safety school, like a school that you think you can get into, but you're not super excited for, because you're going to spend such a long time there that if it's not absolutely fantastic news for you to get into there, then it's just not worth applying. And yeah, I think it's good to start getting ready to like apply to grad school like very early. Like every summer I would write like a different like personal statement and like update that every year, get feedback on that every year. I think the personal statement is like one of the most important parts of the graduate school application. It helps you stand out from other applicants. It helps you make up for any seeming deficits in your like application profile. Like if you had like low grades or something, or if you had like a summer you didn't like you didn't like have any like particular experience in, your personal statement can really like make up for that. And I would like update that every single summer. And yeah, there's also, not every school has this, but some schools also have like graduate visiting programs, where it's just like a weekend that in the fall or spring that if you're an undergrad, you can apply and get like a scholarship and like go out and visit the campus and meet people. So those are really great opportunities. I don't know how many universities have them, but I did too, like one at Penn, one at Hopkins, when I was applying, and it really helped me get a sense of the campus and how much I would really like the culture there, get to meet the faculty, the grad students, and really feel more confident in wanting to apply to those schools.
So the last application cycle around, I applied to 2 programs, and I had been in contact with the PIs at both, with both my mentors in both places, and was getting some pretty good indications that I was going to have an opportunity at one of those places. So I felt confident in applying just to 2 programs, but before this round, I've applied to multiple schools, just throwing out applications without contacting mentors, and had no luck there. So your chances will increase dramatically if you can make personal contact.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I'm not sure, but it seems that in the US it's kind of the same thing. For some reason, I always thought that is a more strictly application-driven process, but it seems, based on what you guys are saying, that you do need to make contact with advisors before. In the UK, at least, that is almost always a prerequisite. It's actually very rare that I've seen anyone get into a PhD program or receive any PhD funding who has not been in touch with the advisor before and doesn't really familiarize themselves with the lab prior to doing this. It's always in very exceptional circumstances that people actually manage to basically get accepted into a program without having made prior contact. And that's probably because their CV just screams, this person is phenomenal. but like specifically for that project, and they have some skills that no one else in the lab has. So yeah, that's definitely something to be noted. Always make contact.
On the note of making contact with faculty, I will also like, yeah, like at any point it's like good. I would never say it's like a bad time to contact them, but the closer you wait to, like if you're a senior and you're reaching out to them like during the time that they're reviewing applications or like right before like applications are closing, I've noticed that like from like just like my friends' experiences in applying, that faculty will be more likely to just be like, I can't help you in the application process, sorry. Like
Yeah.
they see it just as like a little too blatantly self-serving versus like and genuine interest in wanting to learn more about the lab and the faculty and the research. So if you're gonna reach out, try to reach out like your junior year, like over the summer, like way before you're applying, so they'll be willing to like meet with you and stuff, and they won't see it as just like, of course he wants to meet, he just wants me to like put in a good work, like he's just trying to get something from me. So
Yeah. Can definitely agree with that.
We have a question a couple questions in the chat. One, first of all, are you all grad students in STEM? Ari, I think you are more humanities related with like religious studies and things like that, but I think otherwise it's pretty STEM heavy here. So yes, keep that in mind. If you have a specific question, maybe think about who you'd like to ask. You can ask that in the chat. Yeah, sorry, we don't have a little bit more representation of the humanities. And then Thomas Roberts asks, what is your favorite long-term speculation about your field? So I guess like the overarching question that you're interested in your field. A big question.
Speculation.
Or speculation. Do you have speculations about?
So speculation. I think that one thing that really is interesting to think about is how psychedelic states relate to other extreme altered states of consciousness, such as psychosis, meditative states. Just really, what can we learn from contrasting psychedelic-induced states to other states? I think that's can help us get insight into how psychedelics work more broadly, as well as the brain, and potentially help understand the therapeutic applicability of psychedelics. So just figuring out like the general mechanisms and how they contrast to other states, and maybe can push people with certain disorders closer to a healthier state.
I don't think I have one. So I'm gonna skip this question. I don't think that, I don't really, I'm not really a fan of speculations, I might say, or I kind of like things that have been demonstrated or hypotheses that are backed up by some sort of very long process of ideas. So I don't think that I have something like this. There are a lot of speculations in my field that I disagree with. So we can talk about that.
What's your least favorite?
So I suppose one thing that I disagree with is that you can represent human intelligence with a number. So that's one of the things where like you can basically say that intelligence is only represented by someone's ability of performing highly on reasoning tasks, or trying to basically categorize people on this instead of looking at individual differences. I suppose this is something that gets me annoyed in the field. One of the speculations, which has been taken as a fact for many years in the context of trying to basically use IQ tests. So let's just say that this is something that I disagree with, but I don't think that I have one that I'm a fan of, sorry.
Yeah, so I feel similarly. I don't want to speculate too, I don't want to speculate anything that's not like at this point like grounded in like evidence, as much as I want to say psychedelics are going to become like, the gold standard for TBI treatment or something. It's way far away from that being grounded in anything. But I do hope that if research into neurotrauma, like physical, like neurotrauma, like stroke or TBI with psychedelics, that we get to better understand what are the differences between non-neurotrauma, like people without neurotrauma and depression and anxiety and PTSD, and then the PTSD, depression, and anxiety that seems to be like really like triggered by the neurotrauma that somebody can receive. How different are the neuropathologies? Can psychedelics even treat depression in a traumatic brain injury patient, or is there some sort of like structural damage that or biological changes that make the therapy significantly less efficacious, or is there no difference? So I think it'd be a really cool way to learn more about the neuropathology of those disorders in TBI and stroke patients. But I will say that I think that right now glial cells, microglia, astrocytes are getting a lot more attention in their role in like complex behavior and cognition, and so and different neuropathologies. And so I think that as that becomes more studied in general in neuroscience, that the psychedelic community will start to look into that more as well. And I think that we'll come to greatly appreciate the significance that astrocytes and other glial cells have in mediating the effects that we're seeing with psychedelics.
This isn't so much of a speculation, but I am interested to see the kind of cultural reaction to psychedelics if they become more accessible as actual treatments and not just in the domains of research, and what's going to happen when that happens.
Cool. Okay, one topic that is pretty commonly discussed, or a concern that I think a lot of students have, is regarding the topic of talking about psychedelics or talking about psychedelic use in different contexts. So, for example, if students are looking to study something that's maybe not directly psychedelics, and have concerns about talking about their interests in psychedelic studies in their academic circles, do you have any advice for them? Should they be open and vocal about their interests, or should they be careful? Like, are people still having this sort of negative response to psychedelics? What is your experience in your circles?
No person at a top university which respects itself will ever turn anyone's research-backed interest down. If you write in your application, I'm interested because I partied with my friends last Saturday night, that will definitely be discarded. If you write in your application, I'm interested because I read all of this research about this and that, and I see the links between this and that, and I think it's interesting because this and that, and it can save the world or help the world in this particular context, and that's what I'm pursuing here, then people will be like, wow, this is a motivated person who understands what they're talking about. So I think as long as you fit this criteria, no one will turn you down. And if they do, well, you don't want to be there.
That's a good point.
I personally haven't experienced a lot of like judgment. I think the worst thing that I've experienced is just like maybe skepticism on the claims. Like if I say, oh, this study found this, or like they're showing this, or they're studying this, people might just be like disbelief, but they're not like judging me for like saying that. In regards to, if you're like on an admissions panel, I even like specifically asked this when I was considering applying to the MD PhD program at Penn. I met with a guy who was like basically in charge of admissions for that, and expressed the same concern, saying I have so many ideas, like things that I want to do with like psychedelics, but like, what if like people like, they have to be afraid of people judge me? Should I just steer clear of that? And he very confidently told me that as long as my interests seem grounded in like medical or scientific curiosity, that no one's going to judge me for that. And so I feel like if that's the case at Penn, which I feel like if anything I would assume is has the potential to be a lot more judgy, that's probably translatable to other contexts.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Oh, I would
No, go
say,
ahead.
I would say make it grounded in your interests. I don't have any evidence to say that you shouldn't talk too much about your personal psychedelic use as grounds for your interests, but you might want to just consider how that's coming across. I think some people assume, oh, these people are interested in psychedelics, they must like psychedelics, and that may be the case. So you probably don't need to reinforce that with lots of that.
I think
Yeah, I think you should keep the like private life for the pub journeys, to be honest. And you know, when you go to a pub with people, as we used to 2 years ago, but yeah, but don't write any of that in the application. It's just my personal advice.
yeah, unfortunate. Oh, sorry.
I would definitely say that you should not, in my opinion, mention anything about your own personal experience if you have any, because that makes you seem as if you're interested in it for reasons that aren't saying that you're going to be a good scientist. Exactly. Anybody can take psychedelics and have a very meaningful experience. It doesn't distinguish you in any way that you have had your life changed with these substances. So aside from that, I think being very upfront, as everybody else has said, about your interests, as long as they're backed up with research, is valid. One thing I did notice in undergrad, though, is I was very open about my interest to people, and I would ask like professors and stuff, how could I apply for like a program related to psychedelics, like pretty early on in junior year, and people were like, what are you talking about? I don't think anything like that exists. I don't know how you're going to do anything like that. They were like, you're crazy, kind of, one person. So you might get some dismissal from faculty in that sense, but as long as you know, like if you research programs yourself and you know they're accepting students, don't worry about people saying it's impossible. It can be done, even if you have to maybe be a research assistant or something for a long time or whatever.
Yeah, along the lines of what Hallie was saying, I actually had a professor in undergrad who tried to talk me out of doing anything to do with drugs later on. And there will be this kind of people. It's only natural that people have so many different opinions about topics, but just don't be discouraged by them, because yeah, it is not the first choice of a topic for the majority of people, especially those who maybe read certain kind of media or know of people in their immediate group that didn't have good experiences or whatever their life stories is. Just do not be discouraged by it, because yeah, but when it comes to actual admissions, as long as it's rooted in science, and that's Hallie mentioned very well, everyone can take psychedelics and have an amazing experience. This is why these compounds are so fascinating to begin with. But if that's your reason, because of a primary experience, it doesn't say anything about you as a scientist. And that is what those people want to see. Who are you as a scientist?
Thank you, guys. Yeah, I think a paper came out recently. I don't know if you guys saw it, that was saying that if students in psychedelics talk about their use, then they will be seen as less something, I don't know, less scientific, less valid, less
if it impacts
whatever.
People's views of their work, basically. And what the paper showed is that no, if you disclose personal psychedelic use, that doesn't impact people's views of your work and like what that output is, which is actually true. I mean, if the methods of research are sound, then you can only argue with that there. You can't blame it on someone's personal life.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say, like on that note, that I am curious if like at some point in the future, like once the stigma around personal like use of psychedelics dies down, and we'll see it will see like kind of like disclaimers on papers of like disclaimer, I love DMT and I use it a lot, because I know for like even nutritional studies, like that's something that's starting to happen in the field, is people say disclaimer, I'm a vegan, and there's studies about how like great, you know, plants are for your heart health, or disclaimer, I'm on the keto diet, disclaimer, I'm, you know, so I'm wondering we'll see something like that.
I can't believe that.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's funny.
But then you can ask the same question as for something that's a substance and it is, you know, widely available alcohol. And when people write studies on alcoholism, do they say, I like to drink a beer every night? It's like, you know, it might just reach that stage.
Yeah, I think I've been surprised more in the other direction, that like, it seems like an insane number of people that I bring up psychedelic science to publicly or just in conversation are also like very interested, and people I wouldn't expect, or yeah, so I think it is to me it seems like it would be advantageous to be open about your interests, and then you'll find the community that you get along with because of compatible interests, and they're definitely out there. Okay, so what kind of experiences and extracurriculars, going back kind of, I guess this is sort of switching gears, but what sort of experiences do you think people can have in undergrad that would prepare them for grad school and help them stand out in their application? And what are psychedelic programs potentially looking for specifically?
So the big one, obviously, is research experience. Getting a PhD is all about learning how to do research. I would encourage people to start getting into research as soon as they can. For undergrad, I know some people are like, oh, I should wait till I know more. Like literally the week I got into undergrad, like the semester started, I started asking for research assistance because I was like, I want to be in research. I would say trying a variety of different disciplines is probably a good idea in undergrad to get a feel for what you like. I tried being in a molecular neuroscience lab, didn't like that very much. I was in a more cognitive neuroscience focused lab, and I really enjoyed that quite a bit. And also I would say, aside from research experience, being involved with organizations like SSDP, IPN, just anything related to drugs, I guess, is helpful. And it really helps establish a network of people who can potentially help you find a program that's a good fit for you. If you're interested in being able, in like the more psychological aspects, and maybe potentially you want to go to a clinical program, I would say getting experience in harm reduction. So volunteering for something like Zendo, Nest, even Dance Safe, where you're getting a firsthand experience sitting people that you can put on your application, is definitely helpful. And I would say that was way more, it's been more useful than I would have anticipated. So I would highly stress doing that. And in terms of what you can do for your application, if you can manage to publish anything in undergrad, that's going to help you stick out so much. I did not, but I know other people who have. A big thing is having truly like a novel sort of idea that you want to test, and being able to explain it in quite a bit of detail, because there's so many people who are very well read in psychedelics because it's fascinating, but if they're not saying something that's unique, how are they going to stand out? So yeah, I would say trying to come up with very different questions from what's currently being asked, or getting a lot of research experience in like a discipline or like a method that hasn't really been used a lot in psychedelic science, and then being able to translate those skills into studying psychedelics. That will help you a lot.
I cannot agree with you enough. And yeah, similarly as Hallie, I did start doing research very early on. And I would say that is the main thing that, you know, when someone asks you at that stage, what do you like to do for fun in your undergrad? What's your extracurricular? More research, more projects. And if you can be leading on those and lead on your ideas and show that it's your initiative and something that is backed up by your own reading, your own research, and your novel insights based on that, then it's even more of a plus. And it's actually, it is what people are looking for in applications for PhDs. That unless you are applying for a PhD that a certain PI set up and already has funding for, and you're going to do this, this, that, and they know exactly what they want you to do. If you want to be driving the own thing yourself, which is like probably what most people would like to do during a PhD, then as early as you start that and as early as you have evidence to show that you are trying to do that is better. And definitely trying to approach it from different angles. Again, as Hallie mentioned very well, if you're trying to get into the field, then what is your novel contribution? What is something that no one else has done before? Because if you're just trying to replicate what people have done in the past, that's probably going to be seen just as outdated, not really novel, and it's not going to separate you much from other candidates.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. I think that, yeah, having research experience is important. I think that a lot of people, like this is kind of like a personal preference thing. A lot of people tend to stay at their undergrad university in the same lab that they're in, just so that they can spend more time like getting better at the skills and methods necessary for their home labs, like research. And get closer to like maybe like publishing a paper while they're in undergrad. I personally think it's better to try to go somewhere different every single summer. I think not only is it beneficial for you to like explore different like lab cultures, different mentorship styles, and different like fields, which then allows you to like when looking for like a lab or a grad school, like you're able to like make a choice with more like experience rather than like you're naively like only ever been in one lab, so like that's all you have for like to know like what you want. But I think also when you apply to grad school and you say you've been in all these different labs, you're able to say like, you know, given all the breadth of experience that I've had in all these different fields, I can say with the utmost certainty that like psychology or X or whatever is like what I really want to study. And it allows you to also build your network out a lot so that you have connections at like a lot of the schools that you're really interested in applying to eventually. That's like incredibly powerful. And I also think you should get like some sort of like community engagement. That's like really important to a lot of people. Not every PI I think really cares, unfortunately, but I think it will help you stand out on your application. Something you definitely want to mention on your personal statement. Some schools even have like personal statements that are like particularly like, how are you like helping the community? How do you want to make like the world a better place? So if you have those experiences, it's really nice to be able to talk about them. And when you have to apply to an NSF fellowship, you want to have that broader impact stuff ready to draw from.
Yeah, community engagement, any sort of project like that, I think can also make you stand out substantially. Like for me, I was the educational director of the Psychedelics Society in the city I was living in. So I was doing monthly talks for about a year and a half on different aspects of psychedelic science. And that was basically like the inspiration for PsychedelX in a sense. And through doing that, I learned how to communicate a lot of my ideas more effectively. And I also noticed where like all the gaps in the literature were when putting together the talks. And yeah, that taught me a lot of like soft skills that I think are really essential for doing well in a PhD program. So yes, research experience is important, but make sure if you can that you're getting experience in other areas. And don't, like with me doing talks, I was just super passionate about it. I didn't think it was going to be that helpful. If you're passionate about something and it's vaguely related to psychedelics, if that's what you want to go into, just pursue that project and you will probably learn something that could be helpful for getting in.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I think there are some questions about funding. So maybe if we could talk a little bit about how funding works for grad school, where you guys got your funding, and advice about doing graduate study with external funding, non-university related sources. Yeah. Is that?
I'm funded by the Medical Research Council in the UK. They don't fund the psychedelic part of my work.
Mm.
That's what I do because I care and I'm passionate about it. They fund the neurology side of my work, which I also care about and I'm also passionate about. But yeah, in terms of funding for psychedelics research, I think that's very difficult to get based on what I know from knowing people around who do PhDs in psychedelics. What usually happens is that those PIs have the funding and then they can allocate some of that funding for a certain person to do their PhD in. That's again, a very important reason why you should get in touch with the PIs before you're applying. And often the longer you've known the person, so let's say if you've known this PI for 3 years, in those 3 years, they can help you acquire that funding for your PhD, specifically for something. Let's say if you work for them as a research assistant and then you wait up until they put in a funding application that has a bit that you can use for that PhD as well. So in terms of external sources, that would be how it would work. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents on it.
I believe that the UK and European PhDs are slightly different with getting funding, and it's more difficult. I'm not sure exactly. But in the US, many STEM PhD programs, if you apply and you get in, you get a stipend, and you get that stipend consistently while you're there.
But sorry, but does that cover the research consumables? Because in the UK, usually when you get the funding, you get a budget with that PhD funding for, let's say, the materials that you're going to use if you're doing an engineering, bioengineering project, let's say, or if you're going to have to scan people's brains, then they do give you something allocated for that as well, or they give you money to buy a computer or so on. So is that covered by the lab entirely, even if you just get the PhD in the US, maybe? I'm just asking. I don't know.
Good question.
No, that is not.
Right. So that's, I think, the main difference that we need to highlight here, that in Europe and in the UK, when you get the funding, the stipend, it's not only your stipend, you also have some money in that funding that goes towards the project itself. So you really need to sell the project to the university and explain why it is a feasible investment for their money, or to the research council that funds you.
Yeah. I think the funding situation can also, at least in the States, can vary a lot from like school to school, or even like department to department. Like, for example, I know that bioengineering department itself, I think, will cover the, like, if no funding is available, like the student fails to get funding and the faculty doesn't have extra funding, that the department will like cover like for the entire duration. I don't even think there's like a time stamp on it, the entire duration of your graduate studies. But that's not even the case for like other STEM programs at Penn. So it definitely like, it's a very case by case scenario, and it's good to, it's a good thing to talk to the faculties from the schools that you're applying to ahead of time, so you can get a hold on what their specific situation is.
Cool. We have just a few minutes left. Yeah. And I think we can close with maybe what's up?
I wanted to, like, in terms of like extra funding, this isn't like like a huge amount of funding, but I think it's they're really cool, like small grants. So if you're interested in that, I would definitely check out the Source Research Foundation. It's a great nonprofit org and just has it has I think like 3 different grant programs: community grants, grants for graduate student projects, and one specifically for underrepresented minorities. So definitely check that out.
That's
Yeah,
a
I'll put
very
a
good shout. You can also do crowdfunding, for example, if you have this is the case with some of my projects that I've run. So they're not directly part of my PhD, but because I wanted to run that project so much, I applied for additional funding just for this specific branch that I was interested in, or crowdfunding. Most of my work is computational, so really it's just server costs and stuff like this. So then that can be covered with small grants from people. So that is also an alternative. It doesn't have to come with your PhD. If it's just like one specific project that can be wrapped up in a couple of months and you need funding for that, you can try to seek it during the PhD. So yeah.
Cool. I put the link for the Source Research Foundation in the chat, so check that out for funding. And as a last question, maybe, I think someone put in the Q&A, what do you guys envision for yourselves after grad school? And I guess, like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? What are you doing? What's your life like?
I feel very uncertain about that, incredibly uncertain. There's a chance I could do a postdoc. There's a chance I might not touch research for a very long time and go into like public service and like local politics. So
I want to run my own lab. I've always wanted to have my own lab. I've never wanted something else than running my own lab. So I suppose that I'm still gonna be in the game and just, you know, trying to get through the academic system as it is and change it for the better in the places that I can, and keep working at that, because for myself, there's just nothing else that I've envisioned. I really enjoy doing science. I really enjoy the academic idea of an environment, even though it's not perfect. It's that, you know, it's that academic dream of being a professor that we all kind of grew up believing into. And then it's like this type of work has this noble aura around it, which may have been lost in certain contexts and in certain groups. But personally, I would really like to carry on and have a group of students, you know, and do things together and try to answer the big questions that we all have via the academic system. So I hope that's going to be possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just starting my PhD come the fall, so I have time to work before then as well. So I don't think I really have a clear idea what's going to happen after that. You know, create as much publishable material, work on as many projects as possible during that time, and that will determine probably my options at the end.
Yeah, I agree a lot with Maria, where it's like whatever I can do to get to that dream of being a PI, or just being any sort of position where I am able to carry out some of the research projects I am interested in, I want to be doing, whether that be in academia or in industry. I just want to be doing research in some sense. I can't imagine myself not being in research. So.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming and being here today on this panel. Yeah, I hope that this was useful to all of you and informative. I think it was for myself, as somebody looking to study psychedelics in grad school. And yeah, just to close off, don't forget to go check out the PsychedelX presentations on YouTube. They're now live. And yeah, there's other panels happening throughout the week. So if you're interested, we have an academia panel, a policy panel, psychedelic industry panel, and what's the last one? What am I missing? One more.
Psychotherapy.
Clinical?
Clinical. Yeah, clinical.
Psychotherapy.
Yay. Also, Bobby Traum is here. Sorry I didn't introduce you in the beginning. He is the Intercollegiate Psychedelics Network down there.
Thanks, Isa.
Yeah.
There's
So
a human behind it.
yeah, everyone go to the other panels, have a good week, check out the videos. There's so many amazing talks. I think you guys will really enjoy them. Yeah, thank you all for coming. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good week, everyone.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.